Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to have an event for the clinical practice improvement of the medical imaging department of the University of Toronto. We are very grateful to the support of Dr. Michael Patlas, the chair of the Department of Radiology, for the support to the program over the past 2 years and for the support of this event. And we have a keynote speaker, Dr. David Larson, that we're going to introduce, I think, very soon. And also, thank you for the Department of Pediatric Radiology at CKIDS is also supporting the keynote speaker. So thank you for both. And I think it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Patlas, the chair of radiology. He's going to start and open this event. So thank you, Michael, for being here with us. I think online people are seeing your big screen, big imaging on the screen. And okay, we're going to get started whenever you are ready.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm sorry I am on clinical service, so I was unable to be here in person. I'm very excited to kick our citywide CME event, which would be focused on very important topic of standardization. As you know, we're a very large department, probably one of the largest departments in the world. We have over 300 radiologists and 200 learners. So I think it's very important to agree how we image within the departments and hopefully across the city. And this is the topic of conversation for today. Big thank you for Dr. Doria for putting it all together. It's a lot of work bringing people from different places. And it's also very nice that we not only have academic people, we also have people from community. So we really would see what happens across the city. And thank you for all the speakers. And now it's due. My pleasure to introduce Dr. Doria, who put it all together.
Okay. So thank you so much, Michael, for your kind words. And we're going to get started formally. And so now I'm just going to minimize and share my screen. Just want to see if people can see. Okay, so this is just a summary of some activities that were developed in the Department of Medical Imaging and Clinical Practice Improvement. This is the agenda of tonight. It's a busy agenda. And the topic and the theme of today's talk is about standardized processes towards clinical practice improvement in radiology. What is feasible, what is achievable, and what is valuable? We're going to have an introduction. I think I'm going to very succinctly try to summarize some points that were developed in the program. We're going to have the honor of the keynote speaker, Dr. David Larson, who is going to talk about the strategies for implementing standardized structured radiology reporting. And then I'm going to introduce each speaker that is going to bring different experiences for different hospitals affiliated to the Department of Medical Imaging. So let's start with this nice event. So just this is to give an idea of the vision of the clinical practice improvement that was more towards an educational and network program, preparing the future leaders of imaging in best clinical practices. And also, I think to start, thinking about having AI-ready data, and we have a couple of AI scientists here, like Farzad and others, who are really moving the needle on that. For people who are not familiar with the system, I think the medical imaging department oversees 7 academic hospitals and 9 community hospitals. And it's very important, as Michael mentioned, that I think there is engagement of the community hospitals in clinical practice best practices as well. So we are very fortunate to have a CPI committee who worked very hard over the last 4 years in terms of having different goals that were set up, I think, some time ago in terms of having CPI projects frameworks that are available in the website of the department, CPI education modules, particularly to residents, fellows, and also we have a couple of sessions for staff faculty. We evaluated similar activities externally through the CPI city rounds, I think evaluating industry strategies for implementation of AI processes. And we have guidelines for patient safety that was discussed last year in one of the city rounds as well. Recently, we had a survey that demonstrated that the major interest of most of the hospitals affiliated to medical imaging relate to workflows in AI. And this is something that Pascal Tyrrell is the director of the data platform of the department, is also working with several other leaders to move the needle in this direction. And we also had a discussion about innovation from external person from Hartford 2 years ago. And today, the focus is process standardization. This is the committee, is a very diverse committee, including people from community and from academic hospitals, and also at different levels of their careers, residents, fellows, senior staff, and also people who are physicians and non-physicians. And Dr. Michael Patlas, who is the chair of the department. So in terms of the education, we focus a lot on non-interpretative skills that really could implement clinical practice. And we had a couple of different workshops about quality improvement practices, executing strategy for results, negotiation, finances, organizational processes. And also we started, I think, working with Pascal Tyrrell and his group in AI to develop tools for quantitative assessment that he is going to continue moving forward. This is just an example of one workshop that was offered to the residents of radiology. Now the Royal College requires that the residents have minimum requirements for education during the program. And it was part of the curriculum for the residents and optional for the fellows. And we had, I think, participation of PGY 2s, 3s, and 3 and 4s, and fellows. There was a program with different, I think, experts in quality improvement from our department. And it was a 2-day in-person only workshop. We had a Shark Tank kind of presentation of projects. It was amazing to see the ideas of the residents. Most of the ideas related to their own domain of influence. So they were really concerned about problems in the residency. And they received, like, these are fake checks. Someone asked, I think, if they would receive this money. They say, no, this is just, I think the judges would give some money for them to do the projects. And it was really amazing. Hopefully they can be implemented in the residency program. The CQIPS program is a program that is based in Sunnybrook, and there is also an arm at CKids. And every year, I think starting in July, they have this 1-year program, both for trainees and for faculty. And I think people can apply both for the pediatric or residency or adult program. And there is only a 2 half-day commitment in 1 year. It's 1 day per year. And during this time, you have some homework to do towards developing projects in quality improvement. And this is something that anyone who has interest to further develop, this will be an opportunity that can be pursued. So I think the interest for the CQIP programs just over the last 3 years increased every year. In the past year, there were 16 fellows who applied, 2 faculty and 1 resident. We need more faculty involved, so we need to create capacity for supervision of quality improvement from faculty perspective. This is something that is important because otherwise the trainees do not have the support that they need. And this is probably one thing that Anya Killer from UHN has been working, I think, towards implementing. And this is something that we ask for help for all the faculty. So the CPI city rounds, there were a couple of discussions, I think, through the different hospitals of the city. It started with Olivia Ostro. She's the medical safety leader from CKids. And she discussed about the quality improvement resources that were available at the University of Toronto. This was something that started the foundation of having the possibility of having educational programs, both in different hospitals. We also have an imaging workflow implementation that was an idea of the committee of inviting people from different industries that were really developing AI programs and how they would be implemented into the academic and community hospital environment. And there are many barriers for that. This was something that was very productive because after that, I think we had several ideas on how to do that. The problem is that I think we needed to implement that. And this is something that is the most difficult part because it depends on the leadership and I think the vision for the different hospitals. In patient safety, we also have different leaders in safety from different hospitals who talk about strategies that they use for patient safety. And also we have, I think, some minutes of that and what would be potential next steps for that. So the results of these city rounds are summarized and will be given to Alison to be available in the website of our department. So in terms of the CPI annual events, the first one was delivered by Dr. Brian Wong about how to drive system change and improvement through collaborative quality improvement practice. So he gave 2 examples at that time. We had a keynote speaker, Dr. Barry Stein from Hartford, who totally changed the way the workflows work, I think, in his place using AI. And he did this during the COVID time. So it was something that was very interesting about how innovation can lead to clinical implementation. Last year, we didn't have a keynote speaker, but we had the opportunity to have workshops here among different groups that we try to connect the different portfolios of medical imaging. And I think Henry Wiebe was a resident who developed a wellness program, I think for the residency program that had sustainability. Now another resident is continuing that. And this is exactly what to expect with this sustainability of programs. And Chris and Farzad have been working in CPI research and AI. They really thought about a program for a focus on patients. And we also discussed, I think, what would be required for CPI and education in terms of this interconnection. So today we are very honored to have Dr. David Larson, who is Professor of Radiology at Stanford University, is Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Radiology at Stanford, and has done a tremendous amount of effort in collaborative efforts for quality improvement through the American College of Radiology. He's going to talk about the strategies to implement the standardized structural radiology reporting, which is something that many of us would like to have. And we invite him to give his talk. Thank you. Let's see.
Thank you, Andrea, so much for that kind introduction. Thank you to Michael for supporting this event, and thank you to all of you for coming. It's a real honor to be here at Sick Kids. I was telling the group this earlier today, when I came to the airport and went through immigration, they said, "Are you here for business or pleasure?" I said, "I was here for work." And they said, "What do you do?" I said, "A physician going to Sick Kids." And she said, "Oh, you work at Sick Kids?" And I said, "No, I'm visiting Sick Kids." She said, "Oh, okay." So you have an amazing reputation. I know that this is a phenomenal institution, and it's always a pleasure to do anything with Sick Kids, because what you do for the country and for North America and for the world is really incredible. So it's an honor for me to talk to you today about, thank you, about, let's see, is there a clicker, by the way? Or is it just the mouse? Oh, okay, left, right. Okay.
You need a laser point.
That's okay. All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about implementing structured reporting, but really this is about any standardization. So I'm going to walk you a bit through my journey through, as I was introduced to standardization through structured reporting, and hopefully it'll be helpful. Happy to have a discussion afterwards. Let's see. Maybe. Okay. So when I was I graduated from fellowship in Children's Colorado, and then I spent a year in Intermountain Healthcare, and then I went to Cincinnati Children's. So I was 1 year out of fellowship, and Lane Donnelly was my chair. He recruited me there, and he said, "Okay, we'll make you the director of quality improvement." And he gave me 2 main assignments. One was standardizing all the radiologist reports. The second was radiology peer review. I don't know how many of you have ever done those activities, but for a person who's 1 year out of fellowship, I'm the kid, right? And the new kid, and it's like, here, fresh meat, right? Let's do, you can have standardized reporting and you can have peer review. Okay, good luck. Let's see how that goes. But it was a great challenge. And Lane was incredibly supportive, and so we did it, and we published on this. As far as we know, no one else had published on it, so I think we're probably the first ones to ever have implemented department-wide standardized structured reporting. And then I was recruited to Stanford 4 years later, and that was one of the first activities that we undertook as we were upgrading our PowerScribe version. So both the Children's Hospital and the Adult Hospital have separate instances. So I've installed or led the installation of 3 standardized structured reporting programs. I'm still alive to tell it, although I do have some scars and hopefully a bit more wisdom. So hopefully I can share some of that with you today. And I was asked to write this up in radiographics, so some of what I'm going to share today is there as well. I think the key is to recognize in any standardization project, there are 2 projects really. And Andrea really nicely illustrated the qualitative and the quantitative. I think you could call it, maybe the technical and then the organizational, or as Ron Heifetz said in his book, Adaptive Leadership, the adaptive. The technical really has to do with things that you can break down and solve, and generally are more about the analytical and the details, right? And it's things that we do on a daily basis for the most part. The adaptive part, or the organizational part, is about requiring or helping people to change. It's all about how you manage through change. And so these are very different challenges. So you've got to be on the far right and the far left side of your brain as you're undergoing a project like this. And they require very different problem-solving strategies, but you've got to do them both really well. And you as a team, whoever is doing this has to do them both really well. And if you do, you can be successful. And if not, it can be actually it can be painful either way, even if you are successful, but it can be painful and unsuccessful if you're not careful. And that's the worst. So let's see if this is going to come through. This is kind of what it feels like to do a standardization project. Let's see if it works. We want to browse YouTube. Let's see. Let's try it one more time. No, it's not going to work. That's okay. Well, it's basically what I was going to share is what we have on the cover. This is what it feels like, right? Herding cats. And that's a lot. It's impossible. It feels impossible, but it's not impossible. There's an approach to it, but standardization projects, I would warn, are harder than they may appear. They are really hard. They're a lot of work. But if you come into it with that approach, then you've got a shot at being successful. The fact that they're harder than we think they should be, I will say, is more of a reflection of our own perception of how hard we think they should be. I'm not sure why it is. I think it's human nature, but for some reason we think that standardization projects or consensus building efforts should be easy, or easier at least. If you change that mindset to say, actually they should be hard, it should be a lot of work, then I think you're set for it, right? Because they are hard, but if they're once happen, they can scale, right? They enable amazing things to happen because you basically solved 1,000 disagreements by solving it once really well, and then you don't have to worry nearly as much about the things that don't matter so much on a daily basis and a minute-by-minute basis, and now you can get on to doing the things that you actually care about, like interpreting the study. Right? So that's what a lot of this is about, is to come together on some of those details so that you can free yourselves up as an organization. We can free ourselves up to focus on what really matters most, why we went into medicine in the first place. It wasn't necessarily to dictate exactly the terminology of whether we say normal or normal chest radiograph or normal x-ray of the chest, or that is lost on our referring clinicians. It's more about what we are actually doing in terms of the bringing to the table in terms of our interpretive skills. So, having been through the wars, here's what I've learned about managing a system. When you're managing the templates of the standard reports and this is, again, whatever you're trying to standardize, when you're managing that, you have a lot of power, actually, because whatever is coming out the other end, everyone's going to have to live with it. So you are designing and implementing a system that is going to make a difference in people's lives in some way or another, that is going to intimately interact with them for thousands of person hours, maybe years, many years of person hours. So you got to take it seriously. These are what I came up with, the 10 general principles of system design and management. What I mean by system is some program that is a system and that everyone is participating in it. And the first thing is to adopt a system level mindset. Recognize that you've got conflicting objectives and you got to balance those and figure those out and get to what is hopefully the optimum. To incorporate user-centered design principles. Think of your user, be generous to them, be kind to them. The years of people who are going to have to endure this. Because if you do it well, it will be many years. And they may not thank you, but at least they won't hate you for it. Develop the system. So go through and be explicit about and be deliberate about what you want your system to look like. Have a purpose for everything and sweat the details, right? As we say I'm with the American Board of Radiology. I'm the Quality and Safety Trustee, and I manage the Language and Style Committee. And we say to the rest of the group, so the way that in the American Board of Radiology, the way that exam, the language in that exam is relatively standardized because we think about it a lot. So we sweat the details so you don't have to, right? We think about this so you don't have to think about it. But yes, we think about it a lot, so that it's thought through very carefully. And when those reports go out, those templates go out, there are a million ways that they can come out not quite right. And there's nothing worse than having templates that have multiple, extra periods and capitalization is wrong, and the just minor little things then are scale, right? If you're going to scale, it's got to be done really well. So there's it's important to differentiate between preferences and needs because you've got to balance a lot of stakeholders. And it's not always easy to figure that out, but you've got to work toward to do it. On the one hand, it's important to be as accommodating as possible when you're managing this big system, but not let individual user demands for customization undermine the overall design. So you have to be a good designer and be consistent with that design. When somebody comes to you with a need, you have to recognize, is it worth having a one-off here to potentially disrupt your overall design, or do you want to maintain your coherence? Or do you want to change your design based on what somebody comes forward with you? So there's a tremendous amount of humility that's got to come with this role. We're looking to create that simplicity on the other side of complexity. So we got to embrace and understand the complexity and then find what is the appropriate simplicity after that. So that's elegance, right? That's what we're shooting for. And finally, like, you are in a position of some power, and recognize that, and you can't ever exploit it for either your own personal, imposing your own personal ideas or benefit or those who are closely connected to you. Okay, so that's maybe, if there was nothing else you remember, like, you can, I guess, tune out for the rest of the talk because all of my pain kind of came into this, but I'll go through the rest of it just so that you can kind of see how we thought through it. So when we went through these projects, those 3 times, they're kind of two or maybe three categories I would divide our efforts. One is the consensus building part. The second is the technical and the administrative part. And then the third are the standards themselves and how we shepherded those through. And again, hopefully this is not, you can see this not just in terms of standardized structured reporting, but standardization in general. Hopefully it provides a decent roadmap. Okay, so first we're going to talk about building consensus. There's the first thing that's got to happen is a leadership commitment. This is, whether we like it or not, radiologists' identity are heavily tied to these reports. They love the language in their reports. We love the language in our reports. Our language, we've refined this language over many years, and it's exactly what we want it to be. But it's different than our colleague and their colleagues and their colleagues. And everything is different because it grew up organically. Some of those differences are great because that's the specialization that we bring to it. And some of those, when you have, how many do we, 300 in this department? And how many in this, is that right? And how many at Sick Kids, how many faculty? It's a lot. If everybody says normal a different way, if you're the referring clinicians and you see all these different ways of saying normal, you're never admiring the artist to say, oh, that normal is perfect. That's the perfect normal, right? All they're saying is normal, right? That's all they hear, right? So it's up to us to say, why don't we just find a way to say normal, and then we'll just say it that way. And if it's like, that's not exactly the way I would say normal, it's probably okay, right? Because what we're looking for is coherence on the part of the users of our product, the recipients. Standardizing reports. So if you're standardizing that, you're in a way standardizing the professional's identity. It's an emotionally charged topic. There was yelling at some points, and there was some anger, and so we had to be prepared and had to work through that. And the radiologist will be in the chair's office about this, and probably just about any other standardization effort that we're about to hear from after me. They're probably gonna, somebody's gonna come and have a talk about it, most likely. So it's important to have that leadership support early on. Doesn't mean the leader is going to say it's going to happen exactly like this, and you can do anything you want, and I'm gonna stand behind you no matter what how bad you wreck the place, right? But it is to say I will support you in your efforts, in your good faith efforts to work towards consensus. So if you want to read kind of the textbook on large organization change, I would recommend John Cotter's book, Leading Change. And he identifies 8 ways that change efforts fail, and the converse of that are 8 ways to make sure that they succeed. And I would say all of those were critical for this effort and are likely critical for your effort. And those are not having a sense of urgency, not having, well, why don't we flip it to the positive? If we want these to, especially a difficult change effort, and standardization is almost always a difficult effort, we want that to succeed, we're wise to first of all have a sense of urgency to say this is important and to illustrate to people why it's important. And it's really helpful if it actually really is important rather than something that's manufactured, because people can read through that. Then if it's really helpful if it's not just one person saying it, but if there's a whole coalition, a group that can guide through that change, and then having a vision to say this is where we're going and this is why we're going, this is how we're going to go there. Communication is critical throughout this process, and you're going to hit obstacles, and so you're going to have a way to overcome those. And so people need to be able to see a sense of progress as you're getting, because you're going to get tired. And then there's a temptation to declare victory before you're just quite there, and things come crashing down when you weren't quite done. And then there's embedding it in the culture, right? So that's we could talk for hours about that, but I would say it's wise as you're undergoing these standardization efforts to have this in mind. All right, so one of the things that we set up for our guiding coalition was our structured reporting committee. So the committee has 2 purposes. One is consensus, and the other is execution. So when the committee meets as a whole, as a single organism, so to speak, as a single entity, it serves as the guiding coalition. That's where the consensus happens, the discussion happens. And so the members, you have representative stakeholders, but once this is really important, but it's hard to do. In any board or any entity where you're trying to, your goal is to improve the overall system, you have representation from different stakeholder groups, but once you're there, your job is not to advocate for your own area, it's to advocate for the entire system, right? So that's important for people to understand once they join that stakeholder group, that they're now becoming program advocates and not just their own section or their own division advocates. So that's as a whole, when you meet together. Then when you meet individually, they also are the ones who get the work done. So the individual committee members, they do the heavy lifting of drafting the reports, going through lots of iterations, and then they usually will manage the reports going forward because they've invested so much to get them to be what they are. It's really interesting. I learned so much about people through this process. I know who's detail-oriented. I know who can think, and write logically. I know who can work with their colleagues and will spend time. You learn so much through this. So your leaders are going to learn a lot about you as you're working through these standardization efforts. I know the people who dig in for no matter what versus those who will push back for things that they don't think are right, but will work through. Like you learn a lot about people's personalities. So those members are really important. So you want to select them. You want to get people on there who can get to yes, right? They can somehow find a way to get to yes, and then also who will execute and really help you get the project done. Then in addition to the committee, I'd recommend to have a project team. And basically our project team was me and one other radiologist who was willing to help me and administrative help. Like that was a project team. But it's somebody who's going to go between the meetings and tee up the committee meetings, tee up do a lot of the work that needs to be done so that your meetings are effective and the project moves. And so they keep the project on track. A committee is a terrible way to get something done. A committee is really good at deliberation, but if you only rely on the committee, then you are probably not going to be able to execute in the way you need to. Okay, so now we come to winning hearts and minds. I don't know how many have read this article by Julie Batlan and Tiziana Casciaro, but this is about how change happens in an organization. And they identify 3 types of people, or people take kind of one of 3 postures in a change effort. There are those who will endorse the effort, there are those who will sit on the fence, and there are those who will actively resist the effort. And sometimes it's not the same people for different projects. It can be different people who arise in different, because they may feel strongly about something, either in terms of endorsing or in terms of resisting. But either way, just anticipate that this is going to happen. And so the strategies then are to empower the endorsers, win over the fence sitters, and address the resistors later. Okay, so this is maybe the most important part of this slide. The temptation, what's the temptation to do? Temptation is to say, well, if I can just win them over, then I can win everybody over, right? When you do that, you give them veto power, essentially, and you're giving veto power to people who often aren't seeing the big vision, right? And especially if they're resisting not for the most, altruistic of reasons, right? So hang on to them. Like, let's let them. I would also recommend not hammering them right up front. But often, if you kind of work around them for a while and then come back, and once you've gotten through kind of the ugly baby stage of your effort, where things at first they're not fully baked, so they're not great, right? So at that point, it's easy to criticize. But later on, when you think what you've come up with is bulletproof, they are a great resource because they will shoot bullets at it, right? So if you want someone to shoot bullets, they're going to do it. So once you're at that point, then let them have at it. And then they also appreciate having the chance to weigh in. But that's the order that I would recommend going through. Especially as you're winning over that stakeholder group, the committee, or whatever guiding coalition, and then that next wave, it's important to illustrate, like paint the vision, help people see it in their mind. Illustrate the advantages, anticipate and allay fears. You should know what those fears are going to be going into it. Maintain an open dialogue, no matter how angry people get or how upset they are. Just make sure that I would say you're there to keep talking. You will always keep talking. And concerns, people are concerned for whatever reason. And if they're angry, if they're upset, then they're upset. And whether you think it's legitimate or not, if your goal is to win them over, then you got to validate that. Because for however silly it may seem to me, if somebody else thinks it's important, then I want to hear. I want to understand why and see what we can do to accommodate their needs. And so be as flexible as possible whenever it's reasonable. So this is like a major effort in humility. And so if you're not ready to go through that, then you may want to assign this to somebody else because it really requires that. Okay, communication. There's got to be layers and layers, lots of communication. I recommend going to as you're going to you set up as we set up our committee, the people who are going to do the work. For the most part, it wasn't the division chiefs. We only maybe had 1 or 2 division chiefs in that group because they're busy doing other things. But we went to them and asked them to please nominate somebody and to support them. And we gave them regular updates on how things were coming along because we want their support and we want their input, but not quite at the detailed level. The detailed level, they can pass that along to the people they nominated, right? But we do want to keep them up to date and included. The faculty on some regular basis, the larger group, whoever is going to be affected by this, it's important to let people know what's happening, present the timeline, you don't know details yet, but you'll need leadership to help them know, what you're doing, why you're doing it, give some periodic updates. And then the committee needs to meet at least twice. It can meet, and I would recommend it meet more than that, but there are at least 2 times it needs to meet. One is to lay out the plan, and then the next is to get down to the weeds and decide on the things you need to decide. That's the nuts and bolts of the consensus, the difficult nitty-gritty part of the consensus building process. You have to come out and decide on something, right, and produce something that is tangible. So you have to have that process of working through that. And then that's working together as a committee. It's difficult to schedule. So, you get ahead of that, weeks to months if you need to, but then the individual interaction can happen very frequently with you, as I would meet with each of the members of the committee. Okay, so then once you're together and you decided what you're going to do, it's very helpful to go from high level down to lower level. And so as you structure your effort and incorporate the thoughts of your committee, if you start, just the major issues first, right? So what is the purpose of the meeting? What's the purpose of your effort? And to basically provide input and guidance or let the committee provide input and guidance to that team who's going to take this back and do the heavy lifting, right? Because the committee is a deliberative body. This is a deliberative activity. And so they won't necessarily, as a committee, won't be doing the heavy lifting. That smaller team will do the heavy lifting and then hand over to individuals the heavy lifting. But as a group, they're mainly there to decide things and then to outline next steps. So here's what we established as our priorities. So we established 3 priorities. The top priority was communication, and in order to the clinicians, radiologists, and then the patients, using consistent professional language, succinct and uncluttered appearance. Next priority was compliance and billing, and the third priority is research, QA, and QI, perceived legal risk management. So we did it in this order intentionally, so that when you have a conflict and somebody says, well, I don't think that legal is going to like this, we say, okay, but if we do it this other way, it's not going to be clear to our referring clinicians. And so we should make it in a legalese type of language. And you basically can go back to those principles you've established up front, and it's already decided it for you. So all those arguments that are potentially coming down the pike have already at least been decreased, if not mitigated, because you anticipated those things beforehand with your principles you set up. Then the general principles or design elements, design principles for the reports. And again, in order, there should be consistency, appropriate standardization, it's a balance, maintaining radiologist efficiency, variation on needs of the report, not on personal preferences, right? So we basically came forward with a draft of these, and we discussed these and went back and forth. And by the end of that first meeting, they had agreed to these principles. And so what they didn't necessarily realize, once they had agreed to these principles, they had already agreed to a lot of things down the road, right? Which ended up helping a tremendous amount. So if you can get these principles nailed down, and this is motherhood and apple pie, really, right? But the order is really important. So then you can refer back to this on a regular basis to say, well, wait a minute, now we have to decide between redundancy and succinctness. So how are we going to figure that out? This was maybe I will take credit for this. This is maybe the most brilliant thing that I did. And that was, at the time, this is before poll everywhere, but I went to the library and checked out those clickers that you can do for anonymous voting. And we would present proposed standards and options for each of them, and then just get a poll from everybody. And it was anonymous, so because I had vice chairs and I had residents there. And if you asked to raise a hand, you know, and you've got some heavy hitter whose name you would probably recognize, sitting next to a resident, you know, and they're going to disagree. You're not, you know, you can anticipate how that's going to go, right? It's going to be tough for them to be forthright when they're going to express an opinion that's different than that of the person who's going to write their letter and who's, you know, on the board of many important radiological societies. So for each option, each issue, we would present all the options and discuss the pros and cons quickly, and then we just take a straw poll. And if everyone was agreeing with it, meaning everyone being greater than 80%, then we're done. We'll just move on. If less than 80%, then we talk about it, and then we vote again. And if there was a supermajority at that point, greater than 2/3, then it was going to be whatever they voted on. And if not, if it was less than the supermajority, then it basically went back to that team. Came back to me. Basically, it became an executive decision. Right. So there's a systematic process that was agreed upon ahead of time. And you could see, like, there are moments when I could tell certain important individuals, like, that they didn't get what they wanted, but everybody else wanted to do that. And, you know, they already agreed to the process. It was a fair process. It was already set up. So these are things we went through. What should be the standardized report headers? Should the procedure name be inserted as the title of the report? Should the report include the date and the time of the examination? Should the history be imported into the report? Now your eyes are glazing over, right? Because we're now getting down to the nitty gritty of what we're trying to decide. But if you can anticipate those things beforehand, then you're going to go and decide these. This is the thing that becomes the consensus that then will be binding across the organization. Okay, so then once you've decided on the committee members, you divide it up and you go and work on the language. And the first drafts are going to come back. And the language is going to be awkward, and it's going to be overly wordy and incomplete and inconsistent and non-standardized and full of errors. And so now you've got to have a discussion. Like, that's where the conversation starts between the individual who's running this and the individual who's working on the draft. And you, as a system designer, are trying to figure out how to make this cohesive across the entire system, bringing the same mindset to all the disparate individuals who are coming together. And so there's now an opportunity for you to serve as the editor, go back, make suggestions, they go back and come back with different drafts. Takes a lot of patience on both sides, but through this effort, you eventually, you know, come to consensus. I would say this is a place where to be careful, right? This is where there's a lot of potential danger here, because where feelings are going to arise. So to work through this, be patient and bring that humility. So the art of negotiation, you know, adhere to the standards, but have some flexibility. You always be respectful, engaged, and responsive. Spend a lot of time. Never, ever, ever, ever roll your eyes to somebody who is, especially to somebody who's engaging with you in good faith, right? Then you just killed your trust, right? Anything, it's all a good question. No matter how minute, there's no such thing as a silly question, right? Okay, now let's talk, we're gonna go fairly quickly through the technical side. Mainly to say, understand the system, that whatever the details of the thing you're trying to standardize. You just have to. You have to get down in the weeds. I know, unfortunately, maybe for my own mental well-being, understand PowerScribe really well. At least that version of PowerScribe that we implemented, and understand how the text, the fields work, that there are all the rules that are embedded in it, all the pitfalls, you know, things like the fields that, watch out for things that have to be deleted if you leave them in there. Watch out for these orphan fields. What do all these spaces mean? I don't know. You know, a click-heavy report. Click, 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 click. Oh, man. You know, so all these things are going to be the details you're going to have to worry about. Combinatorial explosion, where you have, you know, modules that build upon themselves and, you know, explode exponentially. So all those things, as you're the system designer, you've got to watch out for it, and you got to know that system really well. Okay, so then task assignment, this is pretty straightforward. We just outlined what has the most reports and went down from there to say those are the reports we're going to do first. There's always the 80-20 rule. There's a long tail. We didn't worry so much about the long tail. There are some reports we just didn't put a template on because it's not worth, you know, when you do 3 of them a year, it's not worth having a template for it. A lot of this then becomes about project management. Now you've got a lot of details to manage, and this is where it's helpful to either be very organized or have someone who's very organized who can help you with things like report assignments, training in the system, version control, meetings versus email communication. It just becomes a lot to manage. And you have to manage that well, because if you don't, you lose your people. And what do you do about delinquents? How are you going to follow up with people who you aren't responding, but do it in a respectful and polite way? Then there's also the questions about, governance, management, change control. And again, these are difficult issues, but you have to work through the decisions, like our personal reports allowed. Do you have to adhere to the normal template? Are you going to let that slide, or you're going to die on that hill? And that's okay, whatever you decide, as long as it's something that you decide together. Okay, quickly about the standards. Again, this is where your eyes are really going to glaze over if you don't care a lot about this topic, but that's a good thing. If you're the one in it, then that's actually very helpful if you care the most about the topic, because that gives you the opportunity to make it how you be the beautiful creation that you want to make it be. So the first thing is if you've got a whole bunch of things, you have to keep them in order. You have to have some order. And so the naming conventions, how many of you are managing something that has different names you're working on? Okay. How consistent are those names? If they grew up organically, I can guarantee you they are highly inconsistent, right? So the first thing is to get on top of is just the naming convention. So you got to come up with a naming convention. And so this was our naming convention. And then we had a macro naming convention if it wasn't the template. So all these little details to be consistent, if you deploy it like this, if it feels to the user, it's like, well, that makes a lot of sense, then you did it right. But if someone comes in and can see the chaos, then you still have work to do. Standard headers, this took hours to agree on, right? But it's really critical, because once you agree on this, you can build from there, but you got to agree on those basic fundamentals. Section standards. So now we have different sections of the report. So how do you want to do it? Do you want to have like you want to have a hybrid, the narrative, or do you want to have a structured list, right? Or do you want to have just sentences? And it's okay to just have the sentences like this rather than paragraph form. Like all these little details that all add up. Somebody has to decide with some rationale behind it. And finally, establishing, once these are established, you're going to have to maintain the standard going forward. So you're going to need a mechanism to do that ongoing. This is our standard. When a new report needs to be created or a report needs to be edited, what's the process? Well, you have this representative talk to the division leader first, and then copy the report over and make their suggested changes, and then send it to me. Well, not anymore, but when I read this, and then we're going to have a conversation. And once it gets to the point where it's approved, then we'll approve it site-wide. Like, what you don't want to do is have individuals now just send it off into the system, or else you're going to lose all that coherence that you spend all that time to develop. If it's small changes or like, I don't need to see every little detail. If it's like a period here and there, you're fixing. But anything more than just anyone's going to notice, you need to have some change control on it. And so to do that, then whoever's running it needs to be really responsive, because people, especially if you're wanting to change it quickly, you got a report right in front of you. Can you please fix this error? Yes, done. That helped tremendously, because the turnaround time is fast. Okay, so it really comes down to these principles and then applying them at detail. And this was my favorite quote. This came after this was put in place. And this is by a radiologist who not only was this person very leery, but this person went into the chair's office and expressed anger at first. And the chair said, hang tight, give it a year, and let's see how it works. And then this is the quote. I was initially very leery of the structured reports, but I've come to have a favorable opinion of them over time. Some of the departmental reports are not worded the way I would ideally choose, but I agree with the overall content, and the team in charge of the reports has been very receptive to suggestions and feedback on potential ways to improve the departmental report. Like, that to me is like high praise, about as high praise, like, is that what you're looking for? It's like, it's not exactly how I would do it, but it's good enough. That right there enables you now to implement something that people will accept, that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, to not now worry so much about every detail of the language of your report and worry about what actually matters, and that is making the right diagnosis in these kids who need your help, and that you need to work efficiently to get them all taken care of. So they are harder than they appear, but if you recognize that it is going to be a lot of work, But if you do it well, it'll stick, and it'll stick for a long time. Then it's very satisfying, actually, to get to that point. So I wish you all good luck.
Probably have time for one or two questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Dimitri.
Thank you for the great talk. I think one of the things that we don't talk a lot is that in the past 20 years, we have moved from, from a speech to become our own transcriptionist. That also relates a lot with technology. And I think that sometimes, I am a big believer in the structured reporting, but I believe that within that report, there are some portions that need to be unstructured. For example, when you are, describing certain things. Question for you will be, how do you, for the new generations, do you see space how to train the unstructured portions of the report? Second question is, in all your standards, you didn't involve the clinicians. Did you ever consider involving the end users?
We actually did,
Right.
but not tremendously. We did to some extent. Let's see. Do I need to do both here? Okay. Yeah, we did to some extent. But just to validate that it worked. I mean, when you talk about the end users, one of the challenges is we have, thousands of end users. So which of the end users do you want to go? And do you want to do a whole survey and so forth? More we relied on trying things out, and then we put it out there and then get some feedback. In terms of, kind of the new generation or maybe even new technology or new approach, we'll see. I mean, again, standardized reporting is something that has has been helpful when you have different ways of saying things that could have helped us get reporting done more quickly in a more consistent way. Now, generative AI brings another question around that. And will we need the same level of standards for reporting with generative AI? I don't know the answer to that. So we'll see. But either way, hopefully this is helpful to at least see of the things you do want to standardize, kind of what are the considerations.
And for you, do the standards, how often do you need to review them and do changes, or do you think that they should be mainly stable over time?
Yeah, I would say as often as it takes. If it's going well, anytime somebody requests a change, we do it as a division. Basically, a division has control and license to change if they would like, but we do ask that they come to consensus on that.
Are your subcommittees by modality? Is that what you recommend?
I'm sorry, say again?
Are your subcommittees by modality? So
by division, by section, by body section. Basically, it comes down to the identity of the people in the organization. Who do they view? If they view themselves as being the CT division, then we would do it by CT. But ours is how the organization is organized.
Alejandra?
Just amazing presentation, and thank you. And I know it's really hard. We tried to standardize some reports at Boston Children's before I was leaving. And one of the biggest problems we saw was actually people wanted to use their own reports. Did you completely forbid the use of the reports, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, so a couple ways. At Cincinnati Children's, we did. We said, no, you got to give this a try. At Stanford, we didn't forbid it, but we certainly frowned on it. And at Cincinnati Children's, we actually said, don't just wipe out. You can't wipe out the report and do your own. And also, if it's normal, just leave the normal alone, right? The other thing that actually one of the most powerful drivers and reinforcers of this is we do require it of the residents and the fellows. Well, guess who dictates most of the reports, right? So if you can find strategies, they're levers that don't necessarily directly challenge people's authority. There are a lot of nudges that you can put in place that can kind of get the adherence to go the direction that you want without clobbering people on the head.
Yes, Marie-Louise?
Two questions along the same lines. Did you invite people to submit their examples of certain reports to then consider as inclusion when the core committee was preparing them?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, how long did it take to complete the whole process?
Yeah, good. So the answer to the first one is absolutely yes. And in fact, we also proactively went out to see how people were dictating and would bring those as examples. And then we would also make up examples and present them in front of people. But for absolutely, we welcome people in. This process, I think, for both was about 6 months. And I was working hard those 6 months, and other people were working pretty hard. I was working really hard. I spent some evenings and weekends on it, but we were able to power it through in 6 months. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So yes, one more question, last question. Yes.
A leg Doppler,
Uh,
and if the study comes up as a leg Doppler and it automatically populates as
Yeah.
the standardized report, it saves you so much time. I think that really encourages people to do it that way. The problem is that there's the labeling, as you put it, between the machine, like the CT scanner, the PACS, and your Power Scribe sometimes don't jive. But if that could be the case for every single study, that would save so much time, because I find a lot of my time is just scrolling through the list of all the pre-canned reports, and then to find the one I need takes 30 seconds.
Yeah, so auto population is great. It's just up there. The quantitative elements are a lot easier to port over and easier to accept as standards. Getting the conventions correct as they go across the systems is an issue. But at the same time, it's really important to remember like why we're doing the reporting in the first place. You don't want the standardization to get in the way of the diagnosis and the communication of the diagnosis. Ultimately, what we're here to do is to understand what's going on with the patient and communicate it in a way that will get the best care possible. So if it's just my style that I want to be different, that's no bueno when it comes to like a big system. But if it's like I'm trying to convey this in a way so that they will understand it, then that's great. And we not only allow that, we encourage that, strongly encourage that. That's what it's there for, is to allow you to customize in the individual patient's case as needed to ensure the best care possible.
Yes, thank you. So we see that Pascal Tyrrell has his hand up. Yes, Pascal.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for the great talk. Very much appreciated that. I'll keep the question really short. I'm an AI guy. Stanford is a hub for AI. I know there's a lot of work and research going on in standardization at Stanford. And so my question to you is, in your opinion, what's going to be most impactful? Is it going to be more in the AI being integrated into the actual reporting process, or is it going to be what happens after in post hoc correction or analysis? I mean, both of them are important, but in your opinion, which is more important first, or where should the emphasis be at the moment?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, I have a couple of responses. First of all, thank you for the question. Anytime you can get things right the first time, it's always better to put it up front. And the tools are coming out that are pretty incredible to be able to do that. Now the question becomes, what is right? Right? What is correct, or what is the appropriate thing, or what is the standard? And ironically, these new tools will likely actually decrease our level of standardization, and that may be okay. Actually, it might be. So what I think the second part I'll answer is, I think there's going to be I don't know if the word race is the right way of saying it, but we're going to see kind of parallel tracks to say, is it better to just allow people to do whatever they want and then turn it into something standard or something that you can extract information from? Or is it better to like have common data elements or other things that, structure that up front? I don't know, but I'd say one thing is, it's not only the report itself, but it's about the thinking. It's about how we characterize things in a similar way, how we converge as a field, because we have those communications, we have those discussions about how do we provide, look for an optimum rather than just everybody do whatever they want. And so I am a little nervous that if we, go too much to say, have the AI just dictate in whatever style that the radiologists wants, we lose maybe some of the advantages of standardization, and there's all the thought and effort that goes into making things as optimal as possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're moving now to the next presenter. And the next presenter is Dr. Alejandra Bedoya. She's a pediatric radiologist at Sick Kids. She recently, we received her and had the honor to have her from Boston Children's Hospital. And she's going to share her experience on the standardization of a G-tube study fluoroscopic assessment. And I think now we're going to have the perspectives of different hospitals and what people have done in terms of standardization of process across the city. So she's going to give her perspective from outside, from another very large pediatric hospital in the US.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea, for that presentation and for the invitation today to talk about this. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So when Andrea asked me to come and talk about an standardization process at Boston Children's, as Dr. Larson says, is really tough. And I wanted to show like a successful one that I did as a fellow. So it's relatively, I wouldn't call it easy, but it was, we had clear goals, and I found these, as I said, as a fellow based on our experience there. So as I said, like, I don't have any financial disclosures, but all this is based from the work that I recently did at Boston Children's Hospital. So we're going to go through the process of standardization. So we're going to identify the problem. We're going to analyze what we were doing. We're going to develop the procedures, communicate the new procedures, implement the procedures, and then we're going to show how we monitor and provided a continuous improvement. So when we think about G-tube studies in fluoroscopy, and I'm going to give you my background of that. When I was a resident, we didn't do any fluoroscopic assessment of tubes. It was done by our IR colleagues, all of them. So when I arrived at Boston Children's and they were done by the body radiologists in the fluoro suite, I wanted to learn from different techniques. And the thing with fluoro is that the good thing of being in a big place is that each person does things a little bit different, right? But as long as there is the same clinical result, and we're not missing cases or having near misses, I think it's fine to learn different ways of doing things if it's safe for the patient. But as I was doing some G-tube studies, I realized that people did it differently, and there were a couple of near misses that I felt that it was really important to standardize in a simple way how to do these studies. So I'm going to start with three index cases that were the near misses, and some of them were missed, but I thought that this was important. And the other thing is that every time we think about a tube study, we feel, or I feel sometimes, that is the easiest study we can do in fluoro. It should take 5 minutes in general, but these studies, although for us could be relatively fast, I think they're really important for our children and their parents, because this is the only way they can eat or they can be hydrated. So I really think that we should pay as much attention as we can in this relatively simple exam. So the first case is a 12-year-old with mucopolysaccharidosis. Unfortunately, the patient was nonverbal. It was a relatively big patient. And this is the story of his G-tube malfunction. So in June, the tube was placed by surgery. Then it was exchanged by IR almost a month later, so pretty short interval, because it was not flushing. And then since then, it has been like malfunctioning, like he came for an ultrasound because of concern for an abscess. And then he came to the fluoro suite where I was a fellow because there was erythema and bleeding. So this was the last image in the G-tube exchange by IR. You can see that it's kind of like a frontal oblique image. Then this is the ultrasound when the patient came for a concern for an abscess, and the report says that the tube, that there is no abscess. That was the question. There was no abscess. But then when he came to our fluoroscopy suite, I was with Dr. Fair, and Dr. Fair was, the most important sequence is the true perpendicular lateral view to the tube. So he had a standardized procedures, and he always started with that perpendicular view that is perpendicular to the tube, but not lateral to the patient. It can be a little oblique. You have to play around with the tube. And then as soon as we do that, you can see that actually the balloon of the G tube is in the soft tissues. However, there is a sinus tract that allows the feeling of contrast to the stomach, right? So yeah, it's going to the stomach, but it's not in the right place. And then when we go back to the exchange tube IR, unfortunately, it looks kind of similar. It's hard to know that if it was placed there, but we only had a single view during the exchange tube. And when we go back to the ultrasounds, actually, the tube was, the balloon, you can see that is in the soft tissues, like it's in the rectus abdominis muscle. And we can compare that, and I'm gonna, let me know if you can see, can you see my arrow? No. Yes, okay, perfect. So you can see how the tube here is in the rectus abdominal muscles, and then when it was replaced, you can see the rectus abdominal muscles on the top, the G tube underneath with air around the balloon. So this was a correct gastric position. Then we have a 25-year-old patient. This is another example with history of gastroparesis. She had jejunostomy took place 2 months ago, and there was pain after flushing. So we did a true lateral to the patient, not to the tube. And then we did a frontal one, and it looked okay. But then it was with Dr. Fair, and Dr. Fair was like, we need a perpendicular one to the tube. Like that was the most important. And then you can see that this one was also in the soft tissues. Then I did this other case. Everything was with Dr. Fair. He has a pretty standardized process. And he was a 15-year-old with cerebral palsy, and he had pain and leakage around the G tube. So it was really hard to move this patient. We started in a frontal position. It's filling the stomach. It kind of looks normal. But then we did all the maneuvers to get a true perpendicular tube, and you can see that there is actually a fracture of the tube and it's leaking into the soft tissues. So after I did these 3 cases with Dr. Fair, I said, how often do we not do a true perpendicular view through the tube? Like I had that question. So I went back to the analyzing phase, and we analyzed the data from January 2020 to January 2021. During this time, we did 226 tube studies, most of them in inpatients and emergencies. Most of the cases were G tubes, some of them were GJ, some were J, some were cecostomies. And most of them, like 92%, were normal. So this explains why these studies is thought to be relatively easy. Like most of them are normal. You know, like we go, we inject, and it's in the right position. We see the gastric emptying, and we're done. So the next question was, how often do we miss the perpendicular view? And as a surprise, I thought it was a relatively high number. It was 12%. So in 12% of the cases, there was no lateral view. And if you talk to Dr. Fair, he said a true perpendicular view, of course, will be perpendicular to the tube, but also you have to see the menisci sign contrast, that is contrast surrounding the whole tube to prove that you are within the stomach. And that was like one of the criteria. So most of the cases that did not have the G tube with GJ tubes, however, the G tube was injected. So I think by definition, every time you inject the G tube, it's really easy to get that perpendicular view. Like we should do it every time we are reviewing a tube. In some of the cases, it was just not performed. So we only have frontal views. In some of the cases, there was an attempt to do a lateral view. However, in this case, there is a pacemaker, and it was impossible to do it. And in some of the cases, it was not needed, right? Like this was clearly in the peritoneum. So we just called surgery, and this was not needed to do a lateral view. So then when we develop the procedures, we said, okay, who are the stakeholders? So it was the radiologists, the trainees, and really importantly was the fluorotechs, because they are the ones who are there every single day, and they see all the variability between trainees as well as attendings, and they are a great reminder. Like they always like tell you, oh, don't forget to, oh, do you want to do a lateral view, Dr. Bedoya? So I think they're the best person to remind us, or like, oh, do you want me to move the patient a little bit more lateral, like more oblique? And you're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So we just did that. And our goal was to ensure uniformity. So we said, okay, sometimes you don't need to do the lateral view, but at 12% was too high, let's go to 5%. So this standardization process was mostly based on education. I mean, I think we all proved how important that was with the index cases. So we showed this in the QC and the QA rounds. We emailed the presentation, the examples. As I said, we engaged the fluoroscopy technologies. We printed, like a simple protocol in the reading room of the fluoroscopy suite. And we didn't want it to be that stringent, like you have to start with the lateral, but we just reminded people that you just have to do it, right? And as I said, like with all the quality process, it's a work in progress. Last time we checked, we reached the goal in 2023, but then people forgot, and then we went back to close to the goal in 2024. So, I mean, this was a relatively, I wouldn't call it simple, but I think it was like a process that we're able to standardize based on like clinical concerns. But these cases, they made me thinking about more than, like everything gets more complex than just let's do a lateral view. But the question is like, how useful, like, are we paying attention to these ultrasound assessments of the tubes? That in the first case that was missed. And there were a couple of technical problems that our IR colleagues, they exchanged the tubes in our fluoro room. So there is no C-arm for them to be able to get lateral views in sedated patients. So that was like another level that we need to figure it out. So in conclusion, we just wanted to share some of the a process that was standardized. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for the helpful information and any questions from the floor? Alejandra, just one question. I think you mentioned that after some time, people started really doing the same things that they used to do. How were you able to implement and keep, I think, stable the level of standardization that you expected?
I think the fluorotechs, we remind the fluorotechs again because they're the ones who are there every single day. And there is less turnover of fluorotechs compared to like residents on some attendings that don't cover fluoro as often.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to move to the next presenter is Dr. Amy Lin. Yes, Dr. Amy Lin is a radiologist from St. Mice, and she has a background, education and quality improvement. And she's going to talk about the standardization in a radiology department, what works for us from the perspective of St. Michael's Hospital. It's an adult hospital here in Toronto.
Well, thanks, Dr. Doria, for the invite. I am actually presenting a lot of this material on behalf of our chief of our department, Dr. Anisha Karpalani. Unfortunately, he had another commitment tonight, so he couldn't make it. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of the things that our department has done in the past 2 years or so. So about 2 years ago, we transitioned to a new chief. And at the same time, so we did a lot of soul searching on what is it that we want to achieve and improve on as a department. So this is our sort of our goals and values that we came up with. I won't bore you with going through every one of these, but really, like, we wanted to know how can we support excellence in radiology. We want to have really great patient outcomes, but we also want to have happy radiologists. So we put in a lot of effort in the past 2 years in terms of standardizing best practices, both in terms of the medicine and the radiology, but and also in terms of what we thought was best management practices as well. So some of these things, these are a few of the topics that I'll go over briefly today. And it would be great if you would have any suggestions or any experiences to share on these topics as well. So in terms of departmental policy, I think we all know that having clear, consistent, and up-to-date departmental policies really help to ensure best practices and prevent delays and confusions. But it seems like there are a lot of legacy practices in radiology. And this is especially, I think, in terms of some of the areas with regards to safety, with regards to contrast, with regards to pacemakers, things like that. There's a lot of new literature coming out in the past maybe 5 to 10 years about these things. But in terms of adoption of these new practices, it's patchy and inconsistent. So it may seem simple, but we updated all of our policies with regards to these things. So in terms of CT, we've abbreviated CT contrast. We've abbreviated our screening question for kidney disease. And just now, instead of asking a lot of things that could be related to kidney function, we just ask you if you have kidney disease or kidney transplant. And we've allowed our ED physicians and other clinicians who are looking after our inpatients to actually take responsibility for the administration of IV contrast, knowing that they also understand some of the risks involved in the IV contrast. And in terms of MR contrast, we previously had a practice where we stipulated that patients who are on dialysis who got gadolinium-based contrast need to be dialyzed within 3 hours after getting their MRI. And that actually has created a lot of barriers in patients actually getting these MRIs because of all the hassles in terms of trying to arrange for dialysis at specific times and arrange for the patient to come down for MR scans during those times. So, and there is really no good evidence to support that practice. So we got rid of that practice. So dialysis patients are no longer required to receive dialysis within a specified time period after gadolinium administration. We simplified our process for MRI for pregnant patients. We previously needed a written consent. It's no longer required. And now we just provide an information sheet for the patient and explain to the patient, of the information that they need. And in terms of contrast allergy and how to deal with that, this is a policy that is to be finalized, and we are following the newest guideline in terms of doing the first line strategy for dealing with contrast allergy is to switch to a different contrast agent in patients who had a history of contrast allergy. We no longer require pre-medication with steroids for patients with history of allergy to low osmolality iodinated contrast or gadolinium contrast. And also, we are using a second-generation antihistamine now to prevent breakthrough reactions in patients with previous mild and moderate hypersensitivity instead of using Benadryl. We have also adopted a new peer learning tool. Previously, we've had a commercial peer review system that assigned approximately, I think, 2% of cases to radiologists for review. But I don't think anybody really liked it that much. Mostly, I think, because if you're assigning 2% of the cases randomly, you actually rarely pick up any clinical significant discrepancies. And people thought it wasn't really all that effective in terms of improving radiologist performance. And people perceived this effort as punitive sometimes because people felt that it was really something to assess their competency. And also that we had relatively poor compliance due to small subspecialty divisions, and also because it was not integrated with our PACS, we had a lot of technical issues with that as well. So it ended up being something that we felt was not really useful and then maybe even had a negative impact on our department. So last year, we started a new peer learning tool that basically was built upon the newer literature on peer learning in radiology, and which focus on learning opportunities and not really for evaluating competence. So it's really simple. So basically radiologists submit cases to be reviewed anonymously at peer learning rounds. And we use the information that we gather at these rounds from these cases for improvement efforts. And we built a really easy to use tool that's embedded in PACS so that it's really easy for people to submit cases. This is basically how the tool looks like. There's a button in our PACS that you can press, and this automatically populates an email message, which has these fields that's auto-populated with the patient information, study information, and what kind of study it is. And so the area circled in green is where the radiologists have to check which division it is, what kind of learning opportunity it is, and just filling some detail to help help whoever is running these quality rounds to discuss these cases. And so we've just started this relatively recently. So we're hoping in the future to have more cases and more rounds, and to really identify improvement areas that we can work on as a department. And standardized reporting templates. So Dr. Larson talks a lot about this, and we've recently actually started to try to promote standardized reporting, using standard reporting templates for certain kinds of studies in our department as well. And we've used a number of we got inputs from all of our radiologists, and also got inputs from some of our referring physicians, and looking in the literature for examples of these standardized reporting templates. And it's a work in progress, but we have a certain templates that are now being adopted, endorsed across entire divisions, and they're used by all radiologists and trainees. And these are, I just put two examples of a standardized template. One is for CT for a renal donor. So one of our abdominal radiologists, Dr. Kolak, worked with other radiologists and urologists in several renal transplant centers in Ontario to come up with this standardized template that has a lot of information that the surgeon potentially will find useful for the transplant. And it's shown that this really helps to promote the completeness of report and the inclusion of all these pertinent information. And we also adopted a couple of templates from the literature. And the example is this MR enterography here. We also have now a new outpatient report turnaround policy. We found that one of the areas that people have found that is an area of improvement for our department is that we have significant variations in our turnaround time for outpatient reporting. And there are, I think, many reasons for this. A lot of it has to do just with having subspecialty radiologists, and in some divisions, there are not that many of them. And there is normal variations in study volume and types. And sometimes there are downtimes and the surge scannings, and which gives that uneven volume, and variation in staffing, and variation in terms of radiologists' commitment to non-clinical duties. So we've we've made some efforts to set a target maximum turnaround time for different types of reporting. And this is supported by data-driven staffing and work distribution, and which comes to the last topic, which is the new Chief Data Dashboard. This is designed by the chief of our department, Dr. Kopolani, and it was built by a third party using multiple data inputs from RIS as well as from our radiologist staffing software. So it's really built to enhance the data culture in terms of using data to support practice decisions. In terms of just policies and recruitment, staffing, and many other things. And this is almost complete. This is a bit of a snapshot of what this looks like. Basically, it has real-time data. That's important in terms of supporting practice management. So you have data such as like volumes and what modalities, and you can filter by divisions, by radiologists, by time of the day, what type of a patient it is, day of the week, reporting radiologist, and whether there's a resident or fellow. And you can match that with the radiologist staffing as well. So it is still a bit of a work in progress, but we're hoping that we can utilize more data to help us really run a more smooth practice that helps both the patients and the radiologists who work here. So thanks a lot.
Fantastic improvements in your department in a very short period of time, right? So do you have any questions to Amy? Yeah. Yes, Ryan.
How did you decide what the appropriate turnaround times are for
So we looked at our historical turnaround times. There's a lot of variability in terms of outpatient turnaround time. And so we looked at that and looked at our volume, looked at our staffing level, and just kind of decided what would be something that is achievable and what we can do to actually help achieve that. So this turnaround target is actually relatively new. So we're probably going to be modifying that, maybe see how well it works. But I think just having real-time data is really helpful in terms of finding something that's realistic, achievable, and to have all these things that you can do to try to actually make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Amy, I have a question. I think I know Dr. Larson just mentioned that they had a committee that enabled, I think, all these changes and improvement changes. So did you have a committee in your department to achieve those changes?
We don't currently have a specific committee, but this is sort of something that was tasked to all the division heads. So, and our divisions are not huge. So we have about 30 radiologists in our department. So each division is maybe, it varies kind of from like maybe 3 to like 8 or 9 radiologists. So people basically, the division head is in charge of, organizing this activity and making a template that everybody can agree to.
So it was based on the divisions. Each division they have some coordination to make some KPIs and define.
Yeah, I would say it's not as sort of systematic as it maybe could be, and people can choose to use it or not, and it's. I think it depends on the type of studies. For example, like, if you're reporting a neural study, a lot of time people don't really use templates just because it's kind of like hard to use. But for something like a CT renal donor, it really makes a lot of sense to use these. So I think we really have to look at what our local practices are and maybe even like, what the preference of the referring physicians are and come up with some of these things. So early in the process.
Yes, thank you, thank you. One thing that would be very nice if it could be some standardization across different departments in the medical imaging department. I think not only in the hospitals, this would be ideal because we have lots of people who may work in more than one hospital and also for patients because they may migrate from one hospital to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just like that.
Yes, just checking if there's any questions. Any questions from the Zoom, from the Teams? So the next presenter is Anya Killer. She's not going to be here, but she left a video. I think she's the only person who left a video here. And we are going to just, I think, listen to her. Just see.
Standardization in Radiology Department, what works for us at JDMI? Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Anya Keeler, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Quality and Practice Improvement. I apologize that I cannot be there in person, but I'm traveling back from a radiology conference. I have no disclosures. During my 10 minutes or so, I will be talking about two topics. One was standardization of our reporting templates, specifically in abdominal imaging, and the other was standardizing multidisciplinary case conference in order to help radiologists be as efficient as possible, given that this is a very time-consuming but important job. So for the first topic, the Canadian Association of Radiologists put out a position statement in 2022 talking about the importance of structured reporting. And this was talking about how communication is very important so that if it's standardized, if we use standardized lexicons, supporting the use of, TI-RADS, LI-RADS, PI-RADS, and all of these other ones, but also setting up your report so that it's always in the same order, no matter which radiologist is reporting it. This helps both the people who have requested the imaging because they know where to look, and it also helps ourselves because when we're doing follow-up in patients, for example, with cancer, it's easy to find the sections that match up. In addition, for research purposes, it's a lot easier for large language models to pull these out, although it's becoming easier even in prose. So we implemented the standard template report for CT abdomen, and this was done with a discussion among the entire abdominal radiology group and surveys and multiple surveys to make sure that we were all in agreement with the order, the amount of information in the report, and so on. We also showed it to our colleagues in surgery and medicine to ensure that we hadn't missed anything. We have separate templates that are specific to certain MRI protocols, such as the mandatory rectal cancer protocol for staging of rectal cancer, and that's expected across the world. And there's also one that we created with our gynecologists who do work with patients who have endometriosis, and it's also in line with the Canadian Association of Radiologist Endometriosis Reporting Standards. The CAR has two separate publications. One is about how to start ultrasound in your department, including the sliding sign and some typical things that will help you identify patients with endometriosis. And then there's this second one, which is about how to do a pelvic MRI. And it not only has all the sequences that are recommended or suggested or optional, but it also has a template. And we use the template that's similar to theirs, but we decided to adjust it just a little bit because we know that our surgeons like things in a certain order, and we basically just reordered what was published. So this has been very helpful, and I think it improves communication between our clinicians. And it actually ties into this second topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is standardized multidisciplinary case conference in the area of EPIC, and improving communication between referring physicians and radiologists. And this was a project that was done with my colleagues, including somebody who has just gotten into residency here in Toronto for radiology, Dr. Zayad Elias, as well as some of my additional colleagues. So we know that multidisciplinary case conference takes up a lot of time for radiologists when they have to prepare. In our department, we have up to 24 of these that are recurrent. Some are monthly, a few are every second week, but most are weekly. And so the amount of time that we spend is very important, and it's not very well reimbursed. So it's important that we optimize the MDCs. So by doing that, we needed support from our colleagues, our surgeons, oncologists, radiologists, as well as pathologists. So we sent out a communication to all of those who participated at MDC to let them know that we're starting this project. And we specifically involved the pathologists, since they are often invited, just like us, to review a case of a patient that they've never met before. In the case of pathology, they have to pull physical slides, whereas we can evaluate images that are hopefully on our PACS, but not always. So we also, we want to make sure that we can do this efficiently. So whenever possible, we request that the physicians putting the cases on the list have a hard cutoff at 48 hours to allow both the pathologist and the radiologist to review the cases, since these are the most complex patients who require special attention. And then finally, we also want to make sure that we know where to find the imaging in our case. So many are in our computer PACS system. However, not everyone, because we are a specialized center, for example, sarcoma, and many others, where patients come from far away, and their imaging may not be on our system. We have requested that the organizers of the MDCs try really hard to put the images, when possible, on our PACS, and we dictate a second opinion consult so that everybody involved knows what was discussed and what we thought of the imaging, and that the images won't fall off our system after a predetermined amount of time, because if there's a formal dictation, it stays. So if it's not from our system, they tell us where it is. There's two options. One is Connecting Ontario, and one is HDERS, where we can actually import the images into our system, and then we can once again dictate a consult so that the images stay. And this is really important for patient care, because when the patients come back for subsequent follow-up, it's important to know what the original looked like. So this is an example. It's very small letters, I apologize, but this is a standardized template that we use for essentially all multidisciplinary case conference. And the radiologist has provided this, and the pathologist, usually 48 hours before, which includes the patient name, their date of birth, their patient identifier, who is the most responsible physician who will be presenting the case. And this is very important, because once a physician puts a case on, it is now expected that they will be there for a multidisciplinary case conference, because in the past we used to have a lot of trouble where physicians would put the cases on and then not show up. It is still sometimes a problem, but they have heard from us how time-consuming these are for us, and we want to make sure that if one radiologist prepared everything, the next radiologist next week shouldn't have to do it again. So they are expected to provide a substitute, whether it's a fellow or a resident, to present the case, and there is a scribe who takes notes during the discussion to determine what is the best management. We also expect a proper clinical question, not, follow-up or what is this, but we need a little bit more information. If there has been a biopsy, we want to know what it is. And then we ask what kind of imaging are they looking for? Is it an ultrasound, a CT, MRI, multiple? And do they need a radiologist, a pathologist, or both? And at the end, the scribe takes notes during the multidisciplinary case conference for everybody to see what the decision was. So this is, again, patient A for Dr. A. This is a biopsy-proven X. Is this mass resectable? So the radiologist will review the images, not only look at the size, but they will look at what it's attached to in the case of a sarcoma, for example. And it says it's in coral, so we know where to look for it. Patient B, what is the most likely type of tumor, and how would you proceed with management? So again, similar question, but slightly different. So we decide, can we just make the diagnosis with radiology? Do we need a biopsy? And it says that's imported from outside, so we'll definitely report a second opinion consult so that it doesn't disappear when the patient comes back in the future. And then the third is recurrence after surgery. Is this patient eligible for a trial treatment? And again, we have specialists in each subspecialty, whether they're surgeons, oncologists, radiation oncologists, and others who will be participating in these multidisciplinary case conference, so we value their input. So it is really important to make sure that we have, consensus. So for this particular project, we had radiologists and pathologists, but we also included surgeons, clinicians, and other health care providers. And we looked at our local environment, because we know that different kinds of multidisciplinary case conference involve different types of patients and different types of physicians, and we want to make sure that we address their needs while still being as efficient as possible. And we tried to be as cost effective because we know that time is money. And when we are spending time doing these multidisciplinary case conference preparation, in addition to the extra review for the hour that we're reviewing, we're unable to provide patient care. So we're trying to do it as efficiently as possible, and people are definitely on our side. So what we'd like to do in the future, we actually did a survey of radiologists before we implemented it and after implementing the standardization. There were still issues with automation where the patient's images don't automatically come from Connecting Ontario. We're going to try and do that. The standardization has improved significantly because the forms are there for the clinician and surgeon to fill out, and it has helped radiologists, although we didn't actually measure how much time they spend preparing the rounds before and after, because that's really hard. Some radiologists do it after hours, some fit it between patients, and some, a small fraction, do get special time dedicated to this because there are certain rounds that we participate in that have over 30 patients. So, just to say that majority of radiologists reported that they had no protected time, and they were happy to have the standardized templates. 23 were neutral, and 44 overall felt that maybe it was already pretty standardized, and various rounds worked in different ways. But overall, 66% is pretty good to show improvement. So, 1.9 FTEs is what we calculated, how much time it should take a radiologist to prepare all these different 24 multidisciplinary case conference, and that's a lot of money. So we want to, again, we're not going to do a cost analysis of how this changed, but just to let you know that we are trying to be mindful of radiologists' time, but also to allow them to do the work they're supposed to do. Thank you so much for your time. I wish I could take questions, but if you email me at ania.kielar@uhn.ca, I would be happy to answer your questions.
So Anya is not here. So if you have any questions, I'm not sure if you were able to see her email. I'm going to write in the chat. And I think also I can email people. I think it's quite interesting because the point that she raised is something really reasonable, I think, because there are so many rounds, and if it could be more conjoint effort between radiology and other clinical departments, it would be much better for the visualization of the final outcomes for everyone in the hospital. Now with the EPIC system, this could be something very valuable. One thing that probably would be the reason why we are together from different hospitals, if it could be from the level of medical imaging, that people could use similar templates, not only locally, but also in other places. It's more difficult for templates for report because of all the reasons that David, you mentioned, but I think in terms of multidisciplinary opinions and reports, this is something that probably is a challenge that everyone is facing. Would anybody would like to comment on that? David, how is in Stanford? Have you thought about having these combined reports between radiology and other departments like pathology?
Let's see, this is working. Yeah, actually there's a team that's working on that right now. They're working on putting that together and then seeing if that can somehow be automated. In fact, that's something they're, if you're at Stanford, you have to ask how this is going to be translated into AI. And so that's, that's part of what's driving that. But yeah, there's a team working on putting together a composite report. I think there's also in some people's minds, the difference between radiology and pathology is, that is one that could be considered differently, that we could be considered to be a diagnostic service. And so this is one effort to think about what that might look like as you start to combine our efforts.
Thank you. And how about the community hospitals, the representatives? Are you doing something in this? Have you thought about this type of combined reports with pathology, for example?
But yeah, we have the same system at UHN where it is a template for the MCC for the radiologists, and our PACS allows us to have almost everything imported. So it's got better connectivity, I think. And then it's up to the the surgeon who brought the patient to rounds to dictate a summary note, and then that goes into the EMR. And then that way the rounds discussion is there for everyone and whatever the decision was.
Thank you.
Yeah, we also have a similar thing, but the other thing that we've done, which is really great, is we've made little work folders in our packs for each rounds. So when you're on your HCC rounds, there's an HCC rounds folder with that week's cases already pre-populated. So you just go to the HCC rounds and you have them there. Same for RCC, same for multidisciplinary vascular rounds. So we have aggregating everything that makes it really easy to review. PACS team. The PACS team. So, you know, we have a similar kind of template. That template is supposed to be a cutoff of 48 to 24 hours beforehand for any cases. Then that goes to PACS, and PACS populates the work list for us.
It's the Friday before, like the week before all those rounds start. So you have to have all the next rounds weeks in by Friday. And then it's the PACS admin who do all the importing.
Yes, this is very helpful. I think at CKIDS, we have lots of fellows. Probably this is why I think people have not thought about that. But this is, I think, something that could be beneficial as well, I think, and for other places as well. Okay, so this is very interesting discussion, and this is why I think it's very interesting from learning from what others are doing in other places. Okay, so now we're going to move to another presentation. Dr. Afsani Amirabadi is going to talk. She has been completing a course on quality improvement at the CQIPS, and I think has been a tremendous, I think, workforce, and also a force of nature in our department in terms of helping everyone, I think, fellows, staff in conducting their research projects. And she's going to talk about the standardization in a radiology department from the perspective of research. And thank you for being here with us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, for the invitation. We have heard great example today about the quality improvement in clinical care. I would like to switch the lens toward slightly toward the research which drive this care. As Dr. Denning, who is the father of quality movement, said, improve constantly and forever. Every process for planning, production, and service. Research, is where we plan and produce the evidence which drives and shapes the research. Applying the quality improvement in the research processes ensure that the foundation of care is as strong as the care itself. Let's give you some introduction about our department. Research has been a long-standing core in our hospital. We are the, sorry.
Still not moving.
In our department, we have over 40 radiologists, 3 scientists, and 4 to 5 research staff who help the fellows in our department. Our fellowship program is one of the largest in the North America, and every year we welcome about 20 fellows from around the globe to come to our department. They come and bring their fresh perspectives and expertise and contribute to the dynamic environment in our department. We expect them to keep up the standard of the hospital and a research standard as well. And we expect them to work closely with one of the faculty mentors and complete at least one project and prepare the project for submitting to a journal. When they arrive to our department, we know they are coming from different culture, languages, experiences, and they may know much about their research. So we try to help them as much as we can, and we do lots of mentoring and training for them. After the first week, they settle down in our department. We have an research orientation with them and teach about the REB and policy in the hospital, in our department, and how they can prepare their study, get the approval, and following up with them till the end. We have training session in literature search and in data reference management, Zotero and EndNote. And also we have some sessions for data management, statistical analysis, and leadership. We have clinical research and radiology course, quality improvement, and qualitative leadership course for them, and also journal clubs, bi-weekly or sometimes monthly journal club for them. But despite the structural guidance and this help we offer them, many of them face challenges, and this hinder they to complete their project, and also impact their development, professional development, and also impact on the productivity of research in our department. To give you some context, I have information for the last 2 years from our department. In 2022 to 23 fellowship cycle, we had 13 fellows who 8 of them completed their project, but from these 8, only 2 or 25% reached to submit their publication to a peer-reviewed journal. In 2023 to 2024, the number increased to 17 fellows, and 13 of these fellows completed their project, but only 3 of them were able to publish their project in a peer-reviewed journal. From the conversation we had with our fellows, and also the experience and personal insight we have, we came up with the root cause analysis for the challenges they have. And to highlight some of them, some of them don't have experience in research or in writing a manuscript, publishing. They don't use their dedicated time for research, and they use it for other priorities, and they have a lack of project management. They have clinical workload, which don't let them to be active in their research project, they have problem with time. Time management is one of the biggest issues for them. When we reflecting on these challenges, we remember of this phrase from Vilfredo Pareto, who is Italian economist, which says 80% of the problem are due to 20% of the causes. This idea first introduced by him and then later brought into the quality improvement by Joseph Joren, which highlights the importance of focusing on the vital few, which impacts the which have the greatest impact on the improvement of the project. With this in mind, we set out to better understand the challenges and real drives behind our challenges our fellow have. To do that, we designed a survey, which is anonymous survey with multiple questions, with multiple answers and open answer questions. And we wanted to, the reason is we wanted to get the insight from all the stakeholders, for current fellows, former fellows, supervisors, and even the admin who contact with the fellows and involved in their movement. So we came up with a SMART aim statement for this quality improvement project for our research. And the aim is to increase the average research project completion rate among department fellows by 20% during the 2024 to 2026 fellowship cycles. And for this survey, which we created in RedCap, we have separate questions for fellows, for supervisor and admins, and supervisor who were our former fellow were welcome to complete the survey from both perspectives. We had to go through the quality improvement management office in our hospital to get approval to distribute the survey even in our own department. And we obtained that approval and then distribute the survey among 113 participants, 25 current fellows, 48 former fellows, 39 supervisor, and one admin. As we want to get the insight from all departments, we contacted several departments in our hospital, and so far I got the approval from one of the department, and they send me the fellows list to distribute the survey with them. Let's go to the preliminary survey results from these 113 participants. We had 36 responses, 32% respond to this, and from this 36, 21 are fellows, 15 supervisor, and 1 admin. Between fellows, most of them are the ones who have 1 year fellowship, and between those who answered, only one of them took the 2 years fellowship in our department. Let's look at some of the answers they have to our questions. The first question was the overall rate of our fellowship program, which 57% of them responded excellent and 29% responded good. We had 5% poor and 10% fair response for this rate. We asked them how effectively does the program support the research activities, and 25% responded somewhat effective, 10% said somewhat ineffective, and 60% very effective. They had some suggestions for support finishing the work, helping fellows to finishing their work, and accessing to the clinical data to build on retrospective data from there. And between 31 to about 40% of respondents agree that the program provides adequate resources for conducting research and have sufficient mentorship and guidance, and they are agreed that there are facilities for publishing their work and presentation, and helps fellow develop critical research skills. For the challenges, they had limited access to resources, 4 of them, 10%, insufficient mentorship, lack of time for research, difficulties in publishing researchers, and a lack of structured research guidance. And for 5 of them put the suggestions that they had the difficulties in getting appointment with a biostatistician, lack of clarification, research tools, software for fellows, and lack of time to retain information for their research, lack of opportunity for having office or a space to develop the research inside, not having an interest in research, and there is diverse research interest and background of IMG. We could also tailor projects based on focused interest and fellowship duration. In the response to what aspects of the research did you find most beneficial, 42% said that facilitation, instruction by supervisor, and or about 29%, they were happy with the courses we have for advanced Excel, basic statistics. They mentioned that availability of a case database to recruit participants. I think they meant the screening tools for screening patient and then recruit the patient for or participants for their study. They praised Dr. Doria for what she's doing, which is really unique and helpful for them. And someone was not very happy with the program and said nothing beneficial. The question, what aspects of the program would you like to be further developed? Content and materials for self-learning in research, more educational research lectures and exercises, more structural facilitation and instruction by supervisors, peer-to-peer interaction and network beyond research design day, and practical exercises during research lecture beyond advanced Excel. And in the response to how will be the research in future for them, and they follow it in their new career, for the scale 0 to 10, they started from scale 6, and the highest score was 35% for scale 10, which is interesting. Now let's go and see the response from a supervisor in response to a question about what challenges have you faced in supervising or mentoring fellows research project effectively. They are not happy with the REB. It takes time to receive the approval, and they mention when we get the approval, they start the study. Before completing the research study, they have to leave. And they are not there is a general lack of diligence between fellows, lack of engagement of fellows, poor management of fellows, lack to adhere to deadlines, lack of previous training to do research, lack of time for both fellows and supervisors, lack of knowledge in statistics and writing. And also, they mentioned that 1 year fellowship is not enough for completing the project. Do you feel the program provides adequate resources and support? 53% were happy and mentioned yes, and 33% somewhat, and 30% they were not. The support was not adequate. How would you rate the program support for a supervisor in their role as a research mentors? 20% excellent, 46 fair, and 26 good. And the last one is how do you think the program could better align with fellows and supervisor expectation? They want dedicated research time, timely access to data, improved culture of celebrating research work, mandatory regular meeting, have one-to-one with meeting with the associate to help them, have a committee to oversee the projects and make sure it is not a duplicated project, catch up with fellows and supervisor when we checking the fellows should be there and see what they are doing. And we need more research assistant to help us. Thanks to all who responded to the survey. We completed so far 32%, and I encourage the others to complete if they haven't done yet, because your opinion matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the excellent, I think, overview. It's very difficult to get this depth of knowledge from people. We don't have much time because we still have 2 presentations. And I think these needs require like one session just to discuss in detail. Just I think in general, I think it would be nice to hear, I think, what is the opinion. I think I'm not sure if other academics, especially academic hospitals, have problems, I think, with publication, because this is just to mention that the criteria for expected for the fellows is to have a manuscript ready for submission. It doesn't need to be submitted. And this is the major problem. If it becomes we need to submit, this would increase the bar. So this depends on the expectation. And this is something that probably requires some dedicated information. David, just a question to you at Stanford. Do the fellows and residents require to have a project, I think, as part of their fellowship?
So it varies across divisions, but in pediatric radiology, I don't know if it's actually required for graduation, but it certainly is strongly encouraged. And we were discussing this earlier in our meetings today. We have a lot more projects than we have fellows. And so the week that they come, we have the first thing we do as they walk in the door is we have a meeting where we present all the possible projects. So we make it really easy. It's almost, you almost can't get out of there without having done a project.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Apsani. So now we have the pleasure of the perspective of Dr. Ryan Margot. He's the radiologist in chief from North York General Hospital, and he's going to talk about clinical decision support for CT and MRI requests in North York General Hospital. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You guys you can hear me okay, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go through our journey with clinical decision support at North York. We're using it for CT and MRI, and at the request of our pediatricians, we're probably gonna be expanding to X-ray as well for pediatric patients. So I'm gonna go through the slides pretty quickly because at the end I'm gonna have sort of a demonstration that I recorded, and I think that's kind of the most interesting part. But essentially I'm gonna talk about our CDS journey. I'm gonna go over the evidence really fast if it makes a difference. I'm gonna show some of the North York metrics, and then we'll have the demonstration. Oops. Okay, so we started in 2020, and we started incremental. The first thing we did was have a clinical decision support tool for, yeah? Okay, that was the overview. Hopefully it's not boring. That's the slide that we're on, the CDS journey. And so anyways, the point is that it's a slow process, but in a way we sort of, the turtle won the race. We started in 2020 with just inpatient MRI. And when we started, there were no comprehensive Canadian imaging referral guidelines available. And so we chose to use the imaging referral guidelines from the UK, the Royal College. They're a little bit closer to how we practice in Canada versus the ACR. And then we did stepwise implementation to include inpatient CT, and then CT and MRI orders that come from outpatients, like in the community, if they come through our Oceans e-referral. Obviously, if a request comes in by fax, you can't apply the computerized clinical decision support to it. And then now, in 2025, there's actually Canadian imaging referral guidelines comprehensive that are out, and it's a project that I've been very involved with and really proud of the work that's been done. And that would have made it a lot easier if we had comprehensive Canadian guidelines at the time. And plus, we've over the time tailored guidelines for our own hospital. And we were the first in Canada, but now we're seeing this getting adopted more widely in Canada. Quebec is actually going province-wide, and then there's some early work in Nova Scotia and BC, and I don't know, maybe, hopefully in Ontario. We'll see what happens. This slide is just to show, it's kind of what was already discussed in some of the other talks, is that you can't just have a big change like this without having done the preliminary work, the buy-in, and the culture. And so at North York, we always had sort of a culture of choosing wisely. They used to have something called the Choosing Wisely Committee, which was representatives from all departments in the hospital, and they used to go through every order set line by line and kind of vet them to make sure that there's no extra blood work or extra imaging in the order sets. And so I think there was a culture of this at the hospital. And so jumping to having the CDS tool embedded in the EMR wasn't such a big step, and we didn't really have criticisms or complaints. And then, as I said, started off kind of using the Royal College, but now we have the CAR guidelines, and there's a link to them for people who are interested. And so that would certainly have made it a lot easier. Okay, so does CDS actually work? There is evidence that shows that having a tool like this makes a difference in appropriateness, in radiation dose for pediatric patients, in volumes in radiology. There's also a lot of literature that shows that having these tools does not make a big difference. And I think if you get into the literature, it's really complicated. Like, I'll just give an example. If someone were to decide they're gonna have some kind of AI tool or a CDS algorithm to help with chest x-ray ordering in an acute care, a big downtown teaching hospital with ICUs and a trauma center, obviously chest x-rays are going to be mostly indicated in that hospital. And so your tool's not really going to help you very much. When you think about how we're using it in a very busy community hospital that takes lots and lots of external referrals, and we're only using it for CT and MRI, which are the high intensity imaging tests, we're noticing that it makes a big difference. So I really think it depends on the context of how the tool's being used and then what kind of guidance you're providing. So this is just kind of a map of our metrics. So this is the past 8,600 CTs and MRs at North York. And the green and the yellow are basically indicated tests. And you can see that we have about 8% of the time somebody perseveres with a test that is potentially not indicated. If that happens, those requisitions are shown to a radiologist. If somebody in our EMR orders a test that is indicated, the green or the yellow, we don't show them to a radiologist. The protocoling is done by the technologist. So the information is gathered up front, and we trust the tool. You can also see that we have a pretty high order change rate when people interact with the tool. It averages close to 10%. So that's 10% of the time people change their order. Okay, and so I'm gonna, hopefully this works. So we're gonna do a demo on the famous North York patient. This is Mr. MyChart. So this is a live patient in our EMR. So it's the only live patient. And so every test that I order, I would have to cancel after. So you'll see me canceling them because we don't want to actually create orders. And I had to record this because they wouldn't let me connect this laptop to the hospital system. But I just have to make sure. Oh, here it goes. Okay, so I'm ordering a test now. So I'm going to go into the order entry and I'm ordering a CT pulmonary angiogram, so CTPA. Okay, so there's our CTPA. Is it projecting okay? Yeah, okay, perfectly. So pulmonary embolism, and let's say, yeah, we don't know what we're doing. No hemoptysis, no symptoms of PE. Like, no, PE is not the most likely diagnosis, none of the above. And no, we didn't bother to do a D-dimer. Okay, so it would prefer that we start with a D-dimer. If we proceed with the CT, it will be shown to a RAD. Okay, so I'm gonna cancel that order, right? I'll just show you how it works if someone's like, if they know what they're doing. Okay, so this time PE is suspected, patient has hemoptysis, and the D-dimer is high. And so it's gonna go ahead, it just wants to know if there's any extra history. You don't have to click anything, so it'll just go through. Okay, so the next one I'm gonna pick is for code stroke. And so North York is not a stroke center. The stroke center is Sunnybrook, which is just 4 kilometers down the highway. So the only time there could be a code stroke at North York is what they call a walk-in code stroke. So the patient has to come in on their own or it's an inpatient. Anyone with an ambulance would go to Sunnybrook. So here there's a potential, I guess, walk-in code stroke. They're asking, is it in the 6 to 24-hour window? So potential, if there's a large vessel occlusion, potential for EVT. They're asking if the ACT-FAST screen is positive. That's the Sunnybrook criteria to see if these patients are potential candidates for EVT. So we'll click yes, and then it's going to go ahead and approve the code stroke. So that would be very uncommon at North York because we're not the stroke center. The much more common scenario is that patients are brought in with chronic stroke symptoms. And so we don't want people ordering the code stroke CTs on those patients. So here, that's the symptoms are greater than 24 hours, right? So this is our usual. And then it's not going to be a code stroke. We don't need the perfusion and all that part, but they are suggesting the common test for working up a chronic stroke patient. I think I have 2 more examples, and then if there's any questions. Okay, so I was just in the screen, so let's do CTA abdominal aorta, but really we're worried the patient could be, let's say, bleeding, right? And so there we have it that we don't want to do the CT for aortic aneurysm. It would be the mesenteric protocol, which has the non-contrast, the arterial phase, and the venous phase, because this is a patient who's potentially bleeding. So there we found there was a lot of confusion about how to order CTAs and the right one, and so the tool's helping people to pick the better one, right? There's one more example that I think people will relate to. It's really common. Just like a super common order CT abdomen for appendicitis in an adult. Mr. MyChart's an adult patient, so the guidelines are different for pediatric. Okay, so CT abdomen, the choices are abdo-pelvis with contrast, so they just pick abdo-pelvis, and appendicitis suspected, right? And so here the tool is showing, an abdo-pelvis is possible if appendicitis is suspected, if the patient has renal failure or a contrast allergy, but we would prefer the abdominal ultrasound or the contrast-enhanced CT abdomen, right? The one with contrast. And the reason that this is really beneficial is because you're helping to determine which tests require contrast at order entry. And so then for the outpatients, if it is a test that requires contrast and the patient's over age 70, like in line with the CAR guidelines, then the tool would prompt for the renal function screening, right? And for MRI patients, it would prompt for the MRI screening. And so collecting that information at order entry really helps downstream in the radiology department. There's less work for the techs, so there's less back and forth because we've purposely determined which patients are going to have the contrast test, not something that we have to protocol. Okay, so that's basically it. I went fast in case there's any questions because I know we're tight for time.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. It's amazing what you're doing. And I think we also don't have much time, but if there's any question from the audience, this is a very innovative system that really reduces the unnecessary examination. So it's amazing. Alejandra.
Have you had any pushback from the clinicians for the extra clicks? And the third question is, you said that you were thinking about trying in pediatrics. Have you, like, some of the guidelines in pediatrics are not, like, they were not great when we tried to implement these before. So any feedback from the pediatric population?
As I said, actually, we did not get a lot of complaints. When we turned on CT chest, there were some issues with the guidance and a few of the respirologists like piped up, but other than that, honestly, nothing. As I said, because these are high intensity tests, if you're an inpatient and you're ordering an MRI and you have to do it all on paper to fill out the screening form, it's obviously a lot slicker to do it this way. And then for pediatrics, our pediatricians have been asking us to turn it on for all the pediatric orders. There's one little roadblock in our EMR is that it doesn't, like if you order a chest x-ray, it just shows as chest x-ray on this system and it doesn't alert at order entry whether the patient's under age 18 or not. And so it's a little bit tricky they'd have to build out some custom orders. So that's something that we're waiting for IS to do. But yes, we hope to do it for all pediatrics.
Yes, and just I think one final thing, Ryan, I think, did you have any information about how much it was reduced, the unnecessary examinations with the system?
So because the ordering was previously on paper, we had no way of tracking all that, right? Because it was all protocoled on paper and we have no way of knowing if a tech or a rad was changing things. So now that we're running the tool, you can get the metrics. And so we can see that there's the 9% order change rate and a 7% cancel rate. Mm-hmm. But I don't have really robust statistics from pre-CDS.
And you developed these in your place, or it was a software purchase?
It's a software purchase that we customized.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very helpful, I think, for many other places. So thank you. So now we have the final presentation from Dr. Noah. So we have a pleasure to have the last presenter, but not the least. And thank you, Noah, Dr. Noah Ditkovitsk. He is the radiologist in chief from the Michael Garron Hospital. It's also a community hospital affiliated to medical imaging. And he's going to talk about the standardization in his radiology department from his perspective. And Noah, how do you want to do? You're going to share your screen, or what do you prefer?
Yeah, I can do that. I just have to figure out how to do that. So thank you so much, everybody, for staying to listen to me. I will keep it brief. So we were looking at standardization at our hospital in terms of what would work, and we decided to start off with the least standardized thing possible, which was our procedures. And like most things in life, the impetus for change always begins with a problem, which in this case was that a patient had a sample that was sent in the wrong fixative, necessitating a rebiopsy. So here at Michael Garron Hospital, we believe in a just culture where it really encourages people to discuss any issues that we have in a very open manner. People are held accountable, but there's never any blame. Instead, we look at things from how can we improve and how can we put in standardized processes to prevent anything bad from ever happening again. We're not always successful, but we do always try. Now, in this case, we had a nurse who started a procedure, but then had to step away for whatever reason. It wasn't documented. Nurse 2 came into the procedure and thought it was a routine biopsy, which it wasn't. The sample had to be specifically sent in saline, etc. The tech wasn't involved in the sample collection or the processing, so it was completely oblivious. And the radiologist had discussed the samples with the first nurse, but not the second nurse, because the radiologist plonked the sample into whatever bin the nurse handed him or her. I can't remember if it was a he or a she in this case. So everybody checked the patient info individually, but nobody had ever gotten together to discuss it as a whole. So as we analyzed this particular patient, we realized that there was a natural siloing of information, and people were doing their part and they were following protocols and guidelines that had been put in place for safety reasons, but they were following all of those procedures individually, which meant that there were multiple single points of failure in the system, where only one person was responsible for analyzing a particular piece of the patient care puzzle. So when we looked at this, we realized that there was kind of a natural hesitancy to speak up when you saw something that was incorrect because it wasn't part of the stuff I'm responsible for. And it created a natural Swiss cheese. So interprocedural questions also tended to crop up, but they resulted in less efficiency because the team was all of a sudden pausing to look for information, which, doesn't exactly make us look good in front of the patient. So our plan was to have a standardized pre-procedural checklist for all procedures. And we drew our inspiration both from the aviation industry, but also from our surgical colleagues, as long as no one will ever tell them that. So the plan was to get all stakeholders to take a minute before we ever actually put any tools into the patient or started imaging the patient or administering contrast or medication, and to go over everything we wanted to do within earshot of the patient and involve the patient. Since we've started doing this, there have been many times where there's been an allergy that the nurse has asked the patient, "Oh, do you have any allergies?" And the patient said no. But when it comes time to actually do the procedure, because the patient's there and they say, "Oh, yes, I have an allergy to penicillin or penguins or something else that starts with P," everybody's available and hears it at that time. Now, if there's a handover, the handover is now everybody else who was there has heard everything that had to happen for that patient. And if there is a handover, the safety checklist, which is the bare minimum of a handover, should be performed. So this is our safety checklist. And I actually just went and took a photo out by our CT scanner, but this is posted in any area where we actually do procedure. And I'm just going to walk you through it. It's fairly simple. It starts off with assessing who the patient is, which means we ask the patient their name. We don't say, "This is John Smith or Jane Doe." We say, "Can you give us your name and your date of birth?" And the patient does. And we are all hearing that this is the right patient. We have eyes on them. We know it's them. We also check the wristband, but we have positive patient identification. We then go over the patient's allergies. Very specifically, we go over any medication that we expect to be administering during the procedure. Do you have a latex allergy? No. Ever had a bad reaction to fentanyl? We actually get that once in a while, but it's not for the reasons that I would expect for this procedural checklist. What about midazolam? And then we talk about CT contrast material. We go over, is there any contraindication for this? And if we're not going to administer contrast material, we kind of skip it. But if we expect to use it, or there's a chance we will, we want to know, do we have an EGFR for this patient? Is there any reason we can't administer? We specifically say, what is the procedure being formed? I am performing a left-sided chest tube placement. And in the case of a CT scan, we specifically say to the tech, will there be breath hold used? And the purpose for this was specifically to limit the number of rescans that we would have to do. If the patient needs to hold their breath for the procedure, let's get our scout with breath hold. Let's get all of our scout images with breath hold and lower the radiation dose. Since we're making a break in the skin, we usually go through anticoagulation guidelines. Has it been held, etc. We use SIR for this, and all of our standard approaches, whatever the SIR says is what we're going to do. What samples are we sending? And are the sample containers ready? So this way, in the case of our initial impetus for change, it was the right sample was sent, but in the wrong material. Now we say, well, what are we sending it for? Let's get all the specimen containers ready. And even if someone, taps out and we miss a step, the containers were prepared at the beginning. Are there any intra-procedure medications that we are expecting to use? So oftentimes we have patients that are, very nervous. And I say, at the beginning of the procedure, we're going to start off by giving this patient 0.5 milligram of midazolam. And this way we can lower their anxiety. But this allows the nurse to prep everything in advance. We don't drop medications that we don't need and we don't expect to use. And we only drop medications that we will be using or will expect to use. And in the case of a renal biopsy, it's very important, particularly in patients with decreased, renal function. Has DDAVP been administered? When was it administered? Are we still good to go? Yes, perfect. Let's rock. Last step is, what safety equipment is in place? Does the patient have good IV access? Yes. Are our monitors all set up and recording properly? Yes. Is saline in the room? And is a tube ready? Are we ready to rock with that if the patient's blood pressure drops? Yes. Do we have oxygen? 100%. And then we go. And then at this point, the radiologist actually signs a form which says go, go. And this whole procedure from start to finish probably takes us 30 seconds, 45 seconds tops, and probably saves that in terms of confusion during the procedure as people try to figure out, well, what do I need to do now? Just by doing this, we become more efficient and safer. So this is a picture in our CT suite. You can actually see where I've posted this right by the CT console, which means that the last thing we do before we enter the room is right in the doorway with the patient there. We say all these things. Patient can hear us. And it's really important to involve the patient in their care, not just from a safety perspective, but also from a patient experience perspective. People like to feel that they have control, and the medical environment is a very loss of control environment. By letting the patient become an active participant in their care, they will overall have a better experience. So, result. More open environment for team communication decreases the risk of critical information not being disseminated. Involvement of the patient, safer and empowering, and increased efficiency, which is something that we can all appreciate. So, I promised I'd be quick, and I was. So you can all go watch the Leafs game. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Noah. This was great. I think great presentation, and I think we are beyond time. Any question, I think, for Noah? And just a quick question, Noah, how was the satisfaction of your team after there was this pre-checklist? I think, did it work well? It was easy to implement or not?
It was very easy to implement. The impetus for change was that we had an issue and everybody recognized there was an issue. So people were desirous of that change. So there was a really strong impetus to do this. People at first were like, why is Noah taping up these sheets all over the place? But now it's just sort of accepted. So the period of change was we talked about it. Everybody had an opportunity to chip in terms of what should be on this list. We discussed it. So we had good engagement from all stakeholders. I mean, except for the patients, because we don't want return visitors. But once we had that, it's worked. And it's essentially worked flawlessly since we implemented it.
So this is very reassurance to hear that. And thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for the presenters, for all the participation from the group. And it is very nice, I think, to see that people are doing amazing things in different hospitals. And it's very nice if we could integrate to start doing good things, I think, based on the lessons and examples from others. So it was a great evening. Thank you for everyone, and have a nice night. Thank you.